My wife joked about giving me away, and our younger neighbor said, "I'll take him." That was the moment her smile vanished. I never imagined a mandatory homeowners association meeting would be the place where my marriage started to crack open. But the truth has a funny way of surfacing in the most unexpected places. I'd been married to Tiffany for 6 years. We lived in one of those picture-perfect gated communities in Fresno, where HOA meetings felt less like community gatherings and more like forced social torture. Neighbors arguing about pool chemicals and parking violations, as if they were negotiating world peace. That Tuesday evening, I walked into the clubhouse expecting another hour of mind-numbing talk about landscaping and guest parking, not the kind of public humiliation that would change everything. Tiffany had shown up early with her friend Brooke. They'd claimed seats in the back row, whispering and laughing under their breath, giving running commentary on everyone else's contributions like they were reviewing a bad movie. I took a seat 3 rows ahead, close enough to participate if needed, but far enough to avoid being dragged into their snarky play-by-play. The meeting began the usual way, President Martinez droning through last month's minutes, the same committee reports nobody really cared about. But then, the atmosphere shifted. Treasurer Williams started explaining a $15,000 shortfall in the budget for the upcoming pool renovation and security gate installation. He adjusted his glasses nervously as people started to fidget, exchanging worried looks. "We'll need to delay the projects until next year," he said, "or consider a special assessment." And that's when Tiffany decided to make her grand entrance into the conversation. "Well, Kevin takes up way too much space at home anyway," she announced, loud enough for everyone to hear, her voice carrying that sarcastic edge she used when she thought she was being funny. "Maybe I should trade him in to help with the budget shortfall. Anyone interested in a slightly used husband?" The room went silent. You could hear the air conditioner hum and the awkward shuffle of papers as 30 neighbors suddenly found their meeting agendas fascinating. Heat rose up my neck as I processed what just happened. My wife had basically put me up for auction, like a piece of unwanted furniture she was trying to unload at a garage sale. Before I could even think of what to say, a voice cut through the silence. "I'll take him." It was Aubrey Morrison, our 26-year-old neighbor from the end unit, raising her hand with calm, effortless confidence, like she was volunteering for a committee position. "I actually value people who contribute to their communities instead of complaining about everything," she added. The change in Tiffany's face was instant and priceless. Her smug smile evaporated like fog at sunrise. Her mouth opened, then closed again, like a fish gasping for air, while murmurs rippled through the room. I watched her cycle through confusion, embarrassment, and genuine panic as a few neighbors chuckled and nodded in Aubrey's direction. President Martinez tried to recover, clearing his throat and steering the meeting back to the budget. But the damage was already done. Tiffany had opened a door she couldn't close, and Aubrey had just walked right through it. Tiffany didn't wait for the rest of the meeting. She grabbed her purse and stormed out, shooting daggers at both Aubrey and me, as if we'd somehow plotted against her instead of just reacting to her own public disrespect. I stayed, partly because I actually cared about the pool renovations and security upgrades, and partly because I wasn't ready to face whatever storm was brewing back home. When I finally walked in an hour later, the house was dark and her car was gone. My phone buzzed before I could even take off my shoes. "Don't want to see your face tonight. Staying at Brooke's. Maybe your new girlfriend can cook you dinner." I stared at the message, stunned by the irony. She publicly humiliated me. And now she was playing the victim because someone had dared to call her bluff. I typed a reply that I knew would either bring clarity or light everything on fire. "Speaking of girlfriends, how's Garrett doing these days?" 3 minutes later, my phone rang. That told me everything. What the hell is that supposed to mean? Tiffany's voice was sharp, not with anger, but panic. I could hear car doors slamming in the background. She was racing home. "It means," I said calmly, sinking into my recliner, "that I'm not as oblivious as you think I am. We need to talk." Moments later, she burst through the front door, looking like she'd driven 90 miles an hour across town. Her makeup was smudged, her breathing ragged. Panic, not irritation, written all over her face. Kevin, I don't know what you think you know, but I know your phone lights up at 11:30 every Tuesday night. I cut in. Her face went pale. I know you've been taking calls in the garage for the past 4 months. I know you deleted 3 weeks' worth of texts last Sunday. And I know Garrett moved back to town in March. The silence between us stretched tight, ready to snap. I could see her calculating, trying to guess how much I actually knew, and how much I was bluffing. Her eyes darted around, looking for an escape. It's not what you think, she finally said, but even her voice betrayed her. There was no conviction in it, just guilt. Then tell me what it is, I said, leaning forward, eyes locked on hers. Because from where I'm sitting, it looks like you've been having an emotional affair with your ex-boyfriend while publicly disrespecting your husband. And tonight, you decided to auction me off because you've already got my replacement lined up. That's ridiculous, she snapped, too quickly, too loudly. The kind of protest that proves more than it denies. Garrett and I are just friends. We've been catching up, talking about old times. Nothing inappropriate. Friends don't need secret phone calls and deleted message histories, I said evenly. Friends don't meet in garages at midnight while their spouses are sleeping. Her face crumpled. That's when she realized I'd seen far more than she thought. She tried to sit next to me, but I held up a hand. Here's what's going to happen, I said, using the same tone I reserve for hard deadlines at work. You're going to show me every message, every call log, every interaction you've had with Garrett since he moved back. Complete transparency. No editing. No excuses. I'll look first, then you can explain. Kevin, you're being unreasonable. Am I? I stood, looking down at her, feeling strangely calm for someone whose marriage might be unraveling. Because the way I see it, you spent a night humiliating me in front of our entire neighborhood while secretly rebuilding a connection with your ex. So either we start with full honesty right now, or you can pack a bag and stay at Brooke's permanently. The words hung in the air like a challenge she wasn't sure she wanted to meet. I could see her weighing it all, confess and face the consequences, or keep lying and lose everything. You have until tomorrow morning to decide, I said, turning toward the bedroom. But just know this, what happened tonight changed everything. How you handle it will decide whether there's still a marriage left to save. The next morning came with Tiffany sitting at the kitchen table, looking like she hadn't slept a minute. Her eyes were red, her face drawn, and her phone sat in front of her like evidence she was finally ready to hand over. I unlocked it, she said quietly, sliding it across the table without meeting my eyes. Everything's there. Garrett's contact, the messages, all of it. I picked up the phone and immediately noticed how her hands were trembling. That tiny involuntary shake told me everything. Whatever I was about to find inside this device was worse than anything I'd already suspected from her nervous behavior these past few months. The message thread with Garrett began in early March. At first, it looked innocent enough, old friends catching up, sharing updates about mutual acquaintances and memories from college. But as I scrolled further down, my stomach began to tighten. By April, their conversations had turned daily, more personal, more intimate. They were confiding in each other about their disappointments, their lives, their regrets over how things had ended years ago. A message from Garrett in late April. Miss talking to you like this. And 3 hours later, from my wife. Miss you too. More than I should. I looked up at Tiffany. She was staring into her coffee cup like it might hold answers she couldn't bring herself to say out loud. 6 meetings, I said quietly, scrolling through the timestamps and location tags that spelled it all out for me. Coffee at Brewster's Cafe, across town, every Tuesday afternoon, right when you told me you were running errands or meeting your sister. Kevin, I can explain, she started, but I was already reading her words. You complained about our marriage being stagnant, I said, my voice calm, though I felt anything but. You told him you felt trapped in a routine that wasn't fulfilling anymore. You shared private details about our conversations, our finances, even our intimacy. Each line I read landed like a physical blow, not just because of the betrayal, but because of the precision, how deliberately she'd built this hidden world, brick by brick, while pretending everything was fine at home. The cafe was 30 minutes across town, far enough that none of our friends or neighbors would see them. Tuesdays, of course, the one day I always worked late. These aren't friendly catch-up conversations, I said, setting the phone down. This is an emotional affair, one you've been planning and hiding for months. You've been building intimacy with another man while lying to my face every single day. It wasn't supposed to turn into anything serious, she whispered, finally lifting her eyes to mine. But what I saw there wasn't remorse. It was regret, the kind you feel when you've been caught. It started as just talking to an old friend, she said softly. Someone who understood me in ways that you don't. That line hit harder than any confession could have. Because in that moment, she was rewriting our marriage, recasting our years together as some hollow placeholder for the connection she'd been craving elsewhere. Tiffany, I said, the word steady but cold. Married people don't meet their ex-boyfriends in secret places to talk about how unfulfilled they are. We never did anything physical, she protested quickly, as if that somehow erased the months of deception spelled out in her own words. Physical isn't the only way to cheat, I said quietly. I scrolled back through the late-night messages, the ones she sent while I slept upstairs, reading her complaints about feeling unappreciated, her secrets, her longing. You've been sharing yourself with him in ways that should be reserved for your husband. She broke down then, but not in the way I'd hoped. Her tears weren't from remorse, they were from frustration. The kind of crying that comes when the walls finally collapse, when a secret life starts falling apart. What do you want me to do? She sobbed. I'll stop talking to him. I'll block his number. I'll do whatever you need. It's not about what I need anymore, I said, standing, my voice calm and final. It's about what you chose to do for 4 months while lying to my face. You didn't just betray our marriage, Tiffany. You disrespected me publicly last night because you thought you had a backup plan. Before she could respond, the doorbell rang. Her sister, Monica, stood there, face tight, posture firm, the look of someone who'd been called in overnight for damage control. Kevin, we need to talk about this rationally, Monica said as she walked in, pulling out a chair at our kitchen table like she was about to lead a business meeting, not mediate a marriage crisis. Tiffany made mistakes, but marriages survive these kinds of challenges all the time. Do they survive 4 months of planned deception? I asked, genuinely curious. Monica had always been the practical one, the so-called voice of reason. Because this wasn't a lapse in judgment. This was a sustained, emotional relationship she deliberately hid, while making me look like a fool in public. Monica shifted uncomfortably, realizing the depth of what Tiffany had done. But she pressed on, her voice steady. She's willing to cut all contact with Garrett and work on rebuilding your trust. Isn't that worth trying? Here's what rebuilding trust looks like, I said, sitting back down, my voice even. Complete transparency. I have full access to your phone, email, and social media anytime, without warning. A detailed account of where you go, who you see, and proof when needed. And counseling, where you take full responsibility for your choices without blaming our marriage for your decision to seek intimacy elsewhere. I watched Tiffany's face as she absorbed every word. I could see her weighing the cost, wondering if saving our marriage was worth giving up the privacy and independence she'd been protecting so fiercely. You have until Sunday night, I said finally, to decide whether you're cutting contact with Garrett permanently, or I'll be filing divorce papers Monday morning. As it turned out, Monica's intervention worked better than I expected. By Sunday evening, Tiffany had made her choice. She showed me screenshots, Garrett's number blocked on every platform, and a carefully worded message saying she needed to focus on her marriage and couldn't maintain their friendship. It's done, she said, showing me the phone with quiet resignation. I told him we can't have any contact anymore. I blocked him everywhere. And for the next 3 weeks, things actually got better. Our relationship felt lighter, more intentional, almost like we were both trying to remember what it was like before everything cracked. Tiffany handed me her phone every night without being asked. She shared her schedule, offered to cook dinner, watched movies with me, asked about my work, and even apologized sincerely, this time for the HOA incident. She admitted it was cruel and humiliating, that no frustration justified treating me that way. And for a moment, I believed her. But I've spent years in project management, and I know what polished progress reports sound like. Her transparency began to feel too perfect. The way she offered information before I even asked. The over-explained errands. The rehearsed details that came wrapped in receipts and timestamps. I went to Target for laundry detergent, she'd say, holding up the receipt. Then, I wandered the home goods aisle for 20 minutes. After that, I stopped at the grocery store for those crackers you like. The line was long. Only 2 cashiers tonight. Every update sounded like a prepared statement, not casual conversation. Like she'd learned that transparency meant flooding me with proof rather than simply being honest. And every night, before handing me her phone, I noticed it, the pause, the careful scroll, the quiet, deliberate check to make sure everything looked exactly as it should. So when she announced Tuesday evening that she was helping Brooke move furniture into her new apartment, something in me stirred, that old instinct that lives in the back of my mind, honed from years of spotting inconsistencies. Brooke's been stressed about getting everything relocated before her lease expires, Tiffany said, grabbing her keys and purse. I figured I owe her for all the time she's listened to me complain about our problems. And she really needs the help with the heavy stuff since she's doing this move mostly alone. The words were believable. The tone was calm. But my gut told a different story. She said Brooke was doing the move by herself. The explanation was perfectly reasonable, believable, even, which somehow made it feel suspicious in ways I couldn't quite justify to myself. What time should I expect you back? I asked, testing whether her response would sound natural or rehearsed. Probably around 9 or 10, she said casually. Depends how much stuff she has to move. You know how these things go, always takes longer than expected. She kissed me goodbye with what seemed like genuine affection, and I watched her drive away, fighting off that uneasy feeling that I wasn't being informed. I was being managed. Those 3 weeks of so-called progress suddenly felt less like reconciliation and more like a performance, a carefully scripted act meant to convince me that real change had taken place, when in truth, Tiffany had just learned to lie more effectively. My quiet suspicion turned into cold certainty at 8:15 that night, when Brooke called my cell. Hey, why didn't Tiffany show up? She asked, sounding confused, a little annoyed. She was supposed to bring her SUV to help me move the dresser, but I've been waiting since 6:30. She hasn't answered any of my calls. I thanked Brooke for letting me know, hung up, and opened the location-sharing app Tiffany had agreed to use, one of our new transparency rules. And there it was, the little blue dot, sitting squarely at Brewster's Cafe. The same cafe where she'd met Garrett. The same cafe that had already become a graveyard of trust. The betrayal hit differently this time. Not like before, not that gut punch of shock and heartbreak, but something colder, heavier. The realization that for 3 weeks, Tiffany hadn't been rebuilding anything. She'd been refining her deception. I drove there without rage, without even shaking. It was the calm of someone collecting evidence, not confronting a spouse. From across the street, through the cafe's tall front windows, I saw them. There they were, sitting in the corner, the same corner as always. The body language said everything. Garrett leaning forward, Tiffany animated and expressive. Not the stiff awkwardness of a farewell, but the easy warmth of 2 people who'd done this many times before. I lifted my phone and took photos, clear, time-stamped, location-tagged. Then I drove home and waited for the story she'd rehearsed. At 9:45, she walked in carrying takeout from Milano's Italian, a place nowhere near Brooke's apartment, but perfectly placed to prop up her little narrative. How'd the move go? I asked lightly as she unpacked the food neither of us actually wanted. Exhausting, she said smoothly, not missing a beat. Brooke had way more stuff than she thought, and some of it was really heavy. I'm definitely gonna feel it tomorrow. I nodded, pulling out my phone. That's weird, I said, showing her the screen. Because Brooke called me around 8, wondering why you never showed up. Her face changed instantly. The practiced calm shattered. Her expression crumbled under the weight of realization, the look of someone who just watched her entire cover story fall apart. Kevin, I can explain. Can you explain this too? I interrupted, showing her the photos. Her and Garrett, laughing at Brewster's Cafe. The same place she'd promised to never go again. I could have added more, the location ping, the timestamps, but I didn't need to. The images said everything. She sank into the couch like her legs couldn't hold her anymore. And for one fleeting second, I almost pitied her. Almost. Until I remembered. This wasn't the first time. This was a choice, another deliberate, planned betrayal after being given every chance to rebuild. He emailed me, she whispered finally, as if the medium somehow made the act less damaging. He said he needed closure, needed to understand why I suddenly cut him off. I just wanted to give him that, to end things properly. Closure, I repeated, looking at the photos again, the easy smiles, the familiar gestures. Is that what we're calling it now? Secret meetings at the same cafe where you lied to me for months, while telling me you were helping a friend move. It wasn't supposed to be like this, she said, tears spilling now. But these weren't manipulative tears. They were quieter, resigned. I really did want to make our marriage work. But when he reached out, saying how much he missed talking to me, how empty his life felt without our connection, you chose him over me. Again, I finished for her. Even after everything. After you promised complete honesty. After you said you'd cut all contact. You chose to meet him in secret instead of keeping your word. I stood up, calm, unshaken. The same eerie calm that had carried me through every truth she tried to bury. I'm filing for divorce tomorrow morning, I said simply. You've proven exactly who you are and what you value. And I'm done pretending this marriage can be saved by someone who treats honesty like an optional suggestion. Kevin, please, she begged. This was different. No, I said, heading toward the bedroom to pack an overnight bag. This was exactly the same. You just got better at lying. Until you didn't. And I followed through. The next morning, I filed the papers with a lawyer who specialized in clean, uncomplicated divorces. No battles. No drawn-out arguments over assets we barely had. Just a quiet, decisive ending. But Tiffany didn't go quietly. She launched a campaign, calling family, mutual friends, anyone who would listen, trying to turn our private disaster into a public referendum. To her, this wasn't about accountability. It was about image. Suddenly, everyone had an opinion on whether I was being cruel or decisive. Whether I was walking away from something fixable or refusing to forgive a mistake. Monica called daily, her tone swinging between pleading and scolding. She's devastated, Kevin. She knows she messed up badly, but she's learned her lesson. She wants to fight for your marriage. Doesn't 6 years together mean anything? It means, I said quietly, that I spent 6 years with someone capable of months of deception, and who doubled down when given a second chance. I didn't sugarcoat anymore. I didn't soften the truth. The issue isn't that she made a mistake, I told Monica. It's that she made choices, deliberate, repeated choices, to prioritize her connection with Garrett over her commitment to me. During the 30-day eviction period the state required, Tiffany swung between two extremes. Desperate apologies one day, angry accusations the next. You wanted this, she snapped one night while packing boxes in our living room. You were just waiting for me to mess up so you could leave without looking like the bad guy. I wanted a wife who didn't lie to me, I said simply. A partner who didn't sneak around with her ex while pretending to help friends move. Someone who understood that marriage isn't about finding people who make you feel good about yourself. It's about choosing the one person you promised to be honest with. The divorce moved faster than either of us expected. No kids, no shared property beyond the basics, a few pieces of furniture, the kind of household stuff that doesn't require lawyers to argue over. No complicated finances either. Just signatures, papers, and silence. Tiffany signed everything 3 weeks later, after her lawyer explained that contesting it would be expensive and pointless, especially with the documentation I'd provided. The evidence spoke for itself. The lies, the meetings, the messages. Our marriage had been short on shared investments, but long on deception. Her last attempt at control came during our final court hearing. She looked at the judge and tried to rewrite the story one last time. "Your Honor," she said, voice trembling just enough to sound fragile. "My husband shut down emotionally years ago." Apparently, she'd forgotten that filing for divorce instead of fighting for counseling kind of undercut that narrative. "I made mistakes," she continued, "but they came from feeling lonely and unappreciated in a relationship where my needs weren't being met." And there it was, the rewrite. Watching her reshape our entire history in real time was surreal. She wasn't taking responsibility. She was assigning blame, not to her choices, but to the atmosphere, to me, to everything except the one thing that mattered: honesty. Even under oath, she couldn't admit what she'd done without trying to make herself the victim. 8 months later, I barely recognized my own life, in the best possible way. It wasn't grand or dramatic. It was quieter, simpler. Mine. Work was thriving. I'd earned a promotion to senior project coordinator. More responsibility, more respect, and finally the sense of professional validation I'd been chasing for years. My house, once filled with the echoes of constant tension, felt like a clean slate. I'd renovated the kitchen, converted Tiffany's old craft room into a home office, my space, my order, my rhythm. The friendships that had wilted during my marriage began to bloom again. I stopped canceling plans to meet Tiffany's endless social demands, and my friends welcomed me back without question, like I'd just been away on a long trip and finally returned. And somewhere in that new normal, I found an unexpected friendship with Aubrey, the neighbor whose dry humor had cracked the silence at that fateful HOA meeting. She was sharp, funny, the kind of person who didn't play games. We started grabbing coffee before meetings, hiking on weekends, trading jokes about HOA drama. It wasn't complicated, it was real. One Saturday afternoon, I was loading groceries into my cart when I saw her. Tiffany, standing in the produce section. She looked smaller, not just physically, but in presence. The polish she'd always carried, the perfect hair, perfect tone, perfect posture, was gone. What remained was a woman worn down by exhaustion, juggling too many shifts, too many regrets. "Kevin," she said when she saw me, her voice soft, stripped of the confidence that used to fill every room she entered. "You look really good. Happy." "Thanks," I said, keeping my tone neutral as I kept moving down the aisle, crossing off items from my list. "How have you been?" she asked, lingering beside me. "Honestly," she admitted after a pause, struggling. "Working at the real estate office during the day, waiting tables 3 nights a week just to cover rent and expenses. Turns out single life is a lot more expensive than I thought." I felt a flicker of sympathy, small, fleeting, but it faded just as quickly. I remembered the years of her draining our shared finances, the way she treated our money like her personal safety net. "That sounds challenging," I said, careful to keep my voice kind but detached. I wasn't cruel, just done. She nodded slowly, studying me, as if searching for an opening in a wall that didn't exist anymore. "I keep thinking about what might have been different," she continued. "If I'd handled things better, if we'd tried counseling earlier, if I'd just been more honest about feeling disconnected instead of having an emotional affair with your ex-boyfriend," I finished for her. The words hit hard. She flinched visibly, as if hearing them out loud shattered the soft, rewritten version of events she'd been telling herself. "Tiffany," I said gently, "I'm sorry you're having a hard time. I really am. But I'm grateful it ended when it did, before we bought a house together, before kids, before any commitments that would have made this even harder to untangle." She looked at me, then really looked, and I could see it in her face. The realization that I wasn't bitter. I wasn't angry. I was free. And that freedom meant any door she'd secretly hoped might reopen never would. "I should have appreciated what we had," she said quietly. "You were a good husband, and I threw it away for something that turned out to be completely meaningless." "You threw it away because you wanted something different," I said softly. "And that's okay. People change. Sometimes marriages don't survive those changes. But I hope next time you handle it with honesty instead of deception." As I pushed my cart toward the checkout line, I realized something simple and powerful. I didn't feel resentment. I didn't feel longing. Just distant politeness toward a woman I'd once thought I'd spend forever with. And in that quiet moment between aisles and fluorescent lights, I knew with absolute certainty I'd made the right choice. Choosing self-respect over a hollow reconciliation wasn't loss. It was liberation.